Okay, so we are holding in the middle of chapter 9 on page 124 in the Sichot. So what we said was like this. We introduced a dispute between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva regarding Mount Sinai. What happened on Mount Sinai? Two arguments, two disputes. Number one was, what was the response? Well, God, the pasuk says, "Vayidabra Elokim" is called Dvarim Eila Lamer. God said all these things lamer, which lamer usually means to repeat, and we said it can't mean to repeat because everybody was there. There's nobody to repeat it to. So we explained that lamer means that they repeated. When God spoke, they responded. What was their response? So here we have dispute number one. Rabbi Yishmael says, for the positive commands, they said, yes, we will fulfill them. The negative commands, they said, no, we will not violate them. And according to Rabbi Akiva, they said yes to everything. They said, yes, we will fulfill the positive. No, and yes, we will not violate the negative. So is this just semantics? What's the difference between them? Another dispute we quoted was also in the experience of Mount Sinai. What actually occurred? So the pasuk says, the verse in the description says, right after the Ten Commandments, it says that the people saw the sounds and the sights. And so Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva again have a dispute. According to Rabbi Yishmael, they saw what is seen, they heard what is heard, and according to Rabbi Akiva, they saw what is normally heard, and they saw what is normally heard, and they heard what is normally seen. So a total breakdown of the natural order. Okay. So we explained that these two disputes are linked. And what's the point? Point is as follows: that the dispute between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, which also relates to their personality, their perspective in life, with which they see the world. The question is, what is the purpose? What was the function of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai? What was the number one achievement or purpose of that event? Now, obviously, nobody's arguing in the details of it. The question is, what did they see as the primary achievement? That's the question. According to everybody, obviously, it's all, they all concede the other point. The question is, what's the central point? So, according to Rabbi Yishmael was a Kohen Gadol, was a high priest. He was represented the service of a tzaddik. A Kohen, a priest, is somebody who's consecrated, somebody who's not of this world. He lives in a world totally outside of the regular everyday life. He's consecrated, separated, set aside to serve God in the temple. He doesn't mix with the everyday crowd. And so Rabbi Yishmael, to him, being in a sense of another world, not being of this world, to him, what was the primary achievement of Mount Sinai was bringing godliness into the physical world, into the low world. And so therefore, according to Rabbi Yishmael, according to him, they saw what is seen and they heard what is heard, meaning that godliness came down to such a low level that even when people live in a world where they see physicality and they hear spirituality remains distant from them. Even to such a level, that godliness was revealed to such a degree that it became revealed even to them. In what fashion? Where the world remained a world. They saw what is seen, they saw the natural order, but they were able to still be moved. Vayaram vayanu vayamdu meirachik. The verse says that they were moved, they were shaken, and it affected them, even in their physical, human, limited capacity. Similar to a teacher who teaches, you see the great achievement, the great ability of a teacher, the great talent of a teacher, when somebody who's totally an ignorant ignoramus, somebody who doesn't have anything, doesn't have a particularly sharp mind, can repeat some brilliant ideas taught by a teacher. That would reflect on the greatness of a teacher, that he can explain some very, very deep ideas to even a simple person. Rabbi Akiva, on the other hand, Rabbi Akiva represents the service of tshuva, of return. Rabbi Akiva came from, he had a non-Jewish background, brought him into the Jewish world. Rabbi Akiva himself was ignorant till he was 40. He was illiterate, he couldn't read. And he represents the idea of ascending, the idea of a person reaching beyond his capacity, going above and beyond, and being able to connect to God. So to Rabbi Akiva, the point of Mount Sinai wasn't to bring God into the world. The main point wasn't to bringing God down into this physical world, but it was the fact that human beings have the ability to rise above their condition, to reach higher. And so therefore, to Rabbi Akiva, the whole experience was a transcendent experience. They suddenly rose from being physical people that perceive physicality and materialism. They were able to see godliness. The physical world became abstract to them, theoretical to them. They rose above their condition. This relates also to the idea, so this all explains the idea of seeing what is heard, hearing what is seen, that dispute. How does this relate to the dispute of what they responded to the commandments. So here too, this it connects. We explained the end of last class that when it comes to mitzvahs, when it comes to the commandments, there are two components to the commandments. There's the common denominator in all commandments, which as we quote in note 31, we say the same. The beginning of every mitzvah has a blessing. The blessings are almost identical. The first part of the blessing, right? You have the first part of the blessing. We thank God, we bless God, who sanctified us with His commandments, and commanded us to. And the difference is the specific command. So, what's the main part of the blessing? Is the main part the first part of the blessing, or the second half of the blessing? So here we have that dispute. It depends. There's the idea that every commandment is similar. They're all the same in that they all fulfill God's will. Here it doesn't matter what the specific command is. A person, God commands, and a person obeys. And that's the same in every mitzvah. Every mitzvah is the same. Every mitzvah will fulfilling God's will. But then, if that's the case, so why do we have so many different mitzvahs? Because each mitzvah also has its individual function, its specific function. So tefillin affects the hand, kosher would affect, inside the body. Every mitzvah has its own impact on the world. He quotes in note 31 with the star, 31a, I guess, that the positive commandments correspond to the limbs, the negative commandments correspond to the sinews. So we see each mitzvah, that's in general, they're divided into those categories. Each mitzvah has its own unique impact it makes on the world. That's why we have all of them. Each one's unique. So the question is, when a person does a mitzvah, what is the main part, what is the main purpose of the fulfillment of the mitzvah? So now, according to Rabbi Yishmael, it was all about bringing godliness into the world, into the low world. So the point of, what the main point of the mitzvah is? It's the impact it has on the physical world. That you can bring holiness into time, you can sanctify time by keeping Shabbos. According to Rabbi Akiva, that's not the point. That's not the main point. According to Rabbi Akiva, the main point of the mitzvah is that a human being has the capacity to connect to God, to serve God. That's the point. The specifics of the mitzvah are secondary. So everybody, obviously, we know that a mitzvah, God gives us the mitzvahs to be able to be elevated. L'tzaref ben abrius is a phrase we quoted from the Medrash. To become more refined, to become more sensitive, to become holier. And according to Rabbi Akiva, that's the main point, is the ability to rise, to be able to connect, to reach higher, to be able to serve God. So that's why, according to Rabbi Akiva, when they responded to the commandments, it doesn't matter was it a positive commandment, a negative commandment, it didn't matter. They said yes to everything. Meaning, yes, we will do what God wants. That the human being has the capacity to do what God wants. According to Rabbi Yishmael, since the main function of the mitzvah is the impact it has on the world, as we said, is the role of the tzaddik. So therefore, what's the command? If there's a positive command that has one type of effect on the world, so to that they said yes. What's the specific command? It's this, okay, yes, we will do it. This is a negative command that has a sort of a passive or different type of impact on the world. They said no, they said something else. Each mitzvah they have to analyze. What is it? What's its impact? What's its function? Therefore, according to Rabbi Yishmael, there's a distinction. The positives they said yes, the negatives they said no. But according to Rabbi Akiva, it didn't matter. That was irrelevant. Just like the statement of the Alter Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe says that were God to command us to chop wood, then we would do it with the same enthusiasm as davening on Yom Kippur. Now, so obviously, you have mitzvahs that we do that are so spiritual, they have such an impact. Obviously, those you could do with enthusiasm, but chopping wood, obviously, if God commands us to chop wood, there'd be a reason for that too. But the point of the statement is that chopping wood would be a meaningless thing. It would have no spiritual benefit. None. It's just chopping wood with no reason, with no benefit whatsoever to the person. In other words, had he given us a mitzvah with absolutely no significance, no relevance, and no meaning, we would perform it with the same enthusiasm. Why? Because it's to fulfill God's command. That would be equal in all of them. Okay. Let's pick it up here on page 125. Late Rabbi Akiva. We explained so we see the difference between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva in the way they look at the world, and the way they look at the role of mitzvahs and commandments in the world, and the purpose of Mount Sinai. That according to Rabbi Yishmael, who is not of this world, the tzaddik, he sees it as the achievement of the giving of Torah is that godliness came down into the world. And into the world, what's the achievement? The world as it is a world. As it's a physical world that's even disconnected or seemingly disconnected from God, or not the perfect place for God to be. and for God to come into that place. So we see the greatness of the descent of godliness even into this lowly place. And therefore he sees that as the experience of Mount Sinai was a natural experience, which underscores the fact that the people were in their natural state and still were able to have this divine revelation. And the same thing is, they said yes to the positive, no to the negative, because it's all about implementing godliness in the material world, in the physical world. According to Rabbi Akiva, the point of Mount Sinai was the ability to rise above the human experience, the human condition. And so therefore, the whole experience was a supernatural experience. It was almost like an outer body experience, an out of this world experience. And the main thing was the connecting with God, with the infinite God. And therefore the answer was yes to everything. Because they saw the common theme in everything, which is the ability to rise above the human experience, not just the impact it has on the human being, but to rise above it and to serve God. And that's yes to everything. Let's finish inside, according to Rabbi Akiva here on page 125. This is the paragraph, the first column on page 125. Like Rabbi Akiva over. According to Rabbi Akiva, however, was halt as the Tachlis in der Tnur von der Reisgem vom Welt und Hakabala is, according to Rabbi Akiva, what was the ultimate goal is to rise above limitation and to sort of go out of this world, to rise above this world. Darf bemela euch is kommen, as die Hadgasha bei Kiyama Mitzvahs is nicht in die Berurim Pratim, was sie tun auf in Inyanim vom Welt, nor in Ausfolgen im Zive Habayra. A Hergish, was is Hecher from Pratim and Agdaris. According to Rabbi Akiva, the main function is reaching above and beyond the limitation of the human being and fulfilling God's will, regardless of the impact it has on in this world. And therefore Rabbi Akiva holds that they responded they responded yes to the positive and yes to the negative. As bei sei hat sich gehört beiker nicht der Prat von der Mitzvah, nor der Zive Kloli von HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was in dem gleichen sich all mitzvahs. When they heard God command, what were they hearing? Were they hearing the specific function, the specific instruction that God had for us to do that would refines the human being? Or did they hear that it's God giving us an opportunity to connect to Him? Did they see the specific impact of a mitzvah, or did they see the infinite nature of the connection that it channels for us to connect to God? According to Rabbi Akiva, they saw that connection. So that's the same in all of them. So it doesn't matter if God said something positive or negative. The answer was yes. Und mit ham sehr haben sie in sehr Entfer nicht gemacht kein Unterschied zwischen Mitzvah sei Mitzvah leisese. Auf alle Zivuim Saif sei Saif leisese ist given ein und derselbe Entfer hein. Sie will mekaim sein was der Rebbe says. Therefore they didn't differentiate between what the God said. It didn't matter whether it was a positive or negative command. The answer is yes to everything. In note 32 the Rebbe says something interesting. It would seem the dispute between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, the first dispute, the one about what they responded to the positive and the negative commands. According to Rabbi in the words that we quoted earlier, according to Rabbi Shmuel, they said yes to the positive and no to the negative. And according to Rabbi Akiva, they said yes to the positive and yes to the negative. So where are they arguing, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva? Where are they arguing? They both say two things. Yes to the positive, and then yes to the negative or no to the negative.
Only in the second one.
So only the second one they seem to be arguing. Everybody agrees that on the positive commands they said yes. So there's no argument there, right? But according to the argument is only what did they respond to the negative commands. But that's not what the Medrash tells us. They said yes. Each one says yes to the positive, as if they're arguing there too. The wording should have been different. It should have said everybody agrees that for the positive commands they said yes. What did they respond for the negative ones? Rabbi Shmuel says no, and Rabbi Akiva says yes. But it doesn't say that. According to Rabbi Shmuel, they said yes and no. According to Rabbi Akiva, they said yes and yes. What's the difference? Because here they're also arguing, even in the yes to the positive, there's also dispute. Even though the conclusion seems to be the same. All agree they said yes. But what was the yes to? According to Rabbi Shmuel, this is what the Rebbe says in note 32. According to Rabbi Shmuel, the yes that they said to the positive command is to the specific impact that the positive commandment has. To the details of the command. There's a positive command that has to be carried out in a specific way, so they said yes to that. So what were they saying yes to? The positive impact and interaction that the person has when he fulfills the commandment. But according to Rabbi Akiva, it was a different yes. According to Rabbi Akiva, what were they saying yes to? Not to the specifics of the positive command. They're saying yes to God's will. So already the yes is a different yes. And therefore they seem, the wording is that they're arguing even on the yes. What did they say on the positive command? In note 33, the Rebbe...
It doesn't express itself in the yes.
Well, but reading it, the distinction, but based on what we're saying here, there's even a distinction even in the yes. Even though on the surface it seems like they're both saying the same thing, they agree about that one, but even there they're arguing. It's a different yes. In note 33, the Rebbe brings a different dispute. He relates it to a dispute of Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva elsewhere about torts, about damages when a person's ox damages somebody else's ox. So the rule is, if it was one without a track record, it was called a shor tam, one that wasn't a danger and a threat to society. So the rule is that if you damage with a shor tam, you have to pay half of the damages. You're responsible for half the damages. What happens if your ox that does the goring, does the damaging, is its value, its worth, is the exact half of the damages? So in other words, let's say that a person has an ox that gores another ox and kills it. First ox that was killed, the victim, was worth $200, let's say, and the goring ox, the one that commits the act, was worth $100. Now, assuming that the dead ox, its carcass was worthless for whatever reason, it was maybe damaged beyond whatever, it was worthless. So now the owner of the initial ox has to pay $100, right? It just so happens that the ox, his very healthy ox that did the damaging, is worth exactly that $100. It's worth the balance of what he owes. So what's the? So we have a machlokes, a dispute between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. According to Rabbi Yishmael, Yusham, you need to evaluate the ox has to be taken to court, and there has to be an evaluation done, and the evaluation has to determine the value, and then there's a ruling, and then the person has to pay either with his ox or the value, the monetary value, whatever he has to pay. According to Rabbi Akiva, it's yuchlat. Rabbi Akiva says the ox automatically transfers to the ownership of the owner of the dead ox, to the victim. The ox is automatically, it becomes his ox. What's it? Now, either way, they have to go through the process of extracting, a transfer of ownership, or he has to pay the money, whatever it is. But the point is, here too, the Rebbe says you can compare it, you can say it's the same thing. According to Rabbi Yishmael, the whole point is the impact that God has in the physical world. And so therefore, if you have a damage, an event like this that occurs where there's damage that's done, so you take the people, you take the parties involved, you take the ox, the perpetrator, you need to go to court, there needs to be an evaluation, there needs to be an assessment, and then it's up to the person to rise, as he is a person, to go carry out the judgment, to do what has to be done. According to Rabbi Akiva, no, the main thing is there's an opportunity to connect to God. And the world itself is nothing. So therefore, if the ox has to be transferred ultimately to the victim, then it automatically becomes his. It's already his. Well, that's addresses. Yeah, right. It's automatic. It becomes somebody else's automatically without the whole process. Okay, b'signa nacher. Let's go and back up on top. B'signa nacher in der Aveida von Rabbi Yishmael Tzadikim in Kiyam HaMitzvahs hört sich die Mitzvah und ihr Pu'ule in Olam. Und darüber teilen sich die Mitzvahs der Pratum und Chalukes bis Bechlal sind zwei Sugim Hein und Lav. Und in der Aveida von Rabbi Akiva Tshuva und Mesiris Nefesh hört sich der Mitzvah und der Kiyam von sein Ratzen Hein. So, in other words, according to Rabbi Yishmael, when we see a mitzvah, what do we see? We see the impact it's supposed to have on us. And therefore, the impact it has on us is different. Each mitzvah is unique. Generally, they divide into two categories, the positive and the negative, the positive and the passive. And so each mitzvah has its own uniqueness. According to Rabbi Akiva, what do we see? What's most highlighted at when we perform a mitzvah? It's the fact that it's God, the commander, the fact that it's commanded by God. And they're all the same. So what do you see there? You see the positive, the hein, the yes. So this is one understanding. Now, chapter 10, the Rebbe is going to give a deeper interpretation of Rabbi Akiva. And the Rebbe is going to basically say like this. According to the first explanation we just gave, according to Rabbi Akiva, it's as if to say there's no world. There's no world. There's just God, and there's no world. And the people were picked up, were elevated at the experience of Mount Sinai, where godliness became the reality. They saw what is normally seen, and the world became sort of abstract. In other words, the only reason there's a world is to serve God. So the world itself isn't. According to Rabbi Yishmael, there's a world that's separate from God, and the point is to bring God into that world. According to Rabbi Akiva, there is no world, there's only God, and the idea is that within world to rise above it, to realize that, and experience that. Now the Rebbe is going to say something even deeper. That according to Rabbi Akiva, it's not that there's just that there's no world. Even according to Rabbi Akiva, there is a world. But Rabbi Akiva sees the true nature of existence. And what's the true nature of existence? An opportunity to connect to God. So this is already a little bit of a different explanation. It's a different approach. In the first approach, there's no world. There's no difference. Yes, a positive command, a negative command. There's no difference. They're all the same. It's all God's will. In the second approach, there is a difference. There's a positive command, there's a negative command. But why is there a negative command? To serve God. Let's see it inside, and we'll explain a little bit more outside. Let's first go inside. Chapter 10. It's more subtle. Another interpretation of Rabbi Akiva's position that they said yes to both the positive and the negative is like this. Is nicht bloß mit dem Tzad Shave, was ist da in Leisase Vasei Kim Tiva Boyre. Based on what we said before, why do they say yes to everything? Because positive and negative commands are the same in that they're all God's will. So yes to both. But here he's saying no, that's not why they said yes to everything, not because they're the same. But it's also because of the positive quality within the negative as well. What does this mean? Was euch sei, auf sei ist man nicht stavig geworden leisasse, haben sie gleich gesehen und fehlt dem Hein. The Teufel Kedusha was kommt der Reis durch dem Mekayim sein leisasse. They only saw the positive within that action. What does this mean? Yeah, but let's say like this. You could say like this. You could say that there's God gives us opportunity to perform commandments. So, what's the nature of the command? Whether it's to give charity, which is a good thing to do, or whether it's not to steal. Not to steal. So, what's stealing? Is stealing good or bad? It doesn't matter. God tells you not to steal. That's what matters. This second explanation, he's saying something deeper. Why is there stealing in the world? Why is there a concept of stealing? Why does stealing exist? Why are there people that are tempted to steal? You know why? Because God says not to steal. So since God says not to steal, so therefore there has to be a temptation to steal. There have to be thieves that steal or that want to steal. And over there you have the ability to serve God. So in that sense, is stealing good or bad?
It doesn't go the other way. That because people have a time to steal, that we have a time not to.
According to Rabbi Yishmael, you could learn it that way. That there's human nature, people want to steal, and God's telling you not to steal. That even in your ugly, immoral instincts, which are to steal, you can serve God. You bring God even there. Okay, that's Rabbi Yishmael. But according to Rabbi Akiva, sorry.
Maybe it's because we have a concept of ownership. If we didn't have a concept of ownership, there would be no stealing.
Yeah, but why do we have a concept of ownership? The same idea. According to Rabbi Akiva, the first way we learned, according to Rabbi Akiva, it doesn't matter. You have human nature. Human nature doesn't matter. God says don't steal. That's what matters. Don't steal. But here in the second explanation, he's explaining something even deeper. Not that stealing is bad. Stealing, in this, according to this position, in theory, obviously in action, stealing is obviously terrible. But what Rabbi Akiva is saying is that stealing itself is good. Meaning, the fact that there's a temptation to steal, you have an ugly desire to steal, is because God doesn't want you to steal. And so he sees the positive even in the negative. According to the first position, and first understanding, Rabbi Akiva doesn't see negative. He just sees an opportunity to connect to God. Here we're saying that even in the negative, he sees the positive. We'll get into note 35 in a second. We'll flesh that out a little more. But the point is that according to Rabbi Akiva, this explains another thing. Go back and note 34. The Rebbe basically explains what emerges from this is a deeper understanding even of the argument. According to, we said earlier that it seems Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva are arguing only on the second point about what the response was to the negative commands. But on the positive commands, they seem to be saying something. So in the first interpretation, we said no. Even on the positive, even where they seem to agree that they said yes, it's also different. Rabbi Yishmael says they're saying yes to the specifics of the positive commandment, and Rabbi Akiva is saying they're saying yes to fulfilling God's will. It's two different yeses. But even according to that, then according to Rabbi Akiva, in the first understanding, if the negative commandments and positive commandments, it's all about serving God, then there's no difference between positive and negative commandments. So if so, Rabbi Akiva, if you want to get technical, Rabbi Akiva should have said to yes to the positive and the negative, they said yes. But he doesn't say that. He says they said yes to the positive and they said yes to the negative. Meaning that even in Rabbi Akiva's statement, there seems to be a distinction between positive and negative. In our first understanding, Rabbi Yishmael should have said yes to the positive, no to the negative, and Rabbi Akiva would respond and say to both the positive and the negative, they said yes. And that would all fit tight, nice and tight. But the fact that they said yes to the positive and yes to the negative seems to be extra. There's extra verbiage. So based on what we said, Note 34 now explains it. There's a distinction. They were saying yes to the positive, to fulfilling God's will, and in the negative, we're going even deeper. We're saying that even in the negative, what were they seeing? They were seeing the yes. They were seeing that it only exists to serve God. So it's already something deeper. That nuance would get lost if you just lumped them together and said to the positive and the negative, they said yes. So it's already nuanced. And that's why he says yes to the positive, to the fulfilling God's will, and even in the negative, even there, what did he see? He saw the yes. Okay. So there are two ways of understanding this Rabbi Akiva's view. One is he doesn't make a distinction. There's yes, there's no, there's good, there's bad, there's nothing. It's just God's will. But in the second view, even within, what does he see? He only sees the positive. In note 35, let's discuss it. Then we'll read it. What time is it? Yeah, we have some time. Let's just. There's the famous story about Rabbi Akiva. We quoted in last class. We quoted how Rabbi Akiva says when we talk about Rabbi Akiva's personality, his background, where he came from, and we also quoted that Rabbi Akiva said his whole life he was yearning to give his life, to sanctify the name of God by giving his life, the ultimate sacrifice. And as we said, we quoted from Baal Shem Tov, where a person is where he wants to be. So in a sense, even before he sacrifices his life, if that's what he wanted, then he lived his life in that manner. So even during his lifetime, he was out of this world. He was living sort of outer body experience. When did he say this? That his whole life he yearned to sacrifice. So it's the famous story. Rabbi Akiva was one of the 10 martyrs. Jewish history, we talk about that on Yom Kippur during the Musaf service. We actually describe the account of the 10 martyrs. One of them was Rabbi Akiva, one of the more famous ones. What was the story of Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva defied the Roman government, which outlawed teaching Torah. And Rabbi Akiva was teaching Torah publicly, and eventually was apprehended by the Romans, and they skinned him alive. They skinned him alive. Sarku b'sari b'masrekes shel barzel. They skinned him, and they did it in public, in front of all his students, to the great horror of all his students. While they're skinning him alive, and he was dying, and with his dying breath, he was saying the Shema. So his students said to him, Ad Kan. What does that mean? What did they say to him? So seemingly a simple reading of what was going on in the episode is they said, Rabbi Akiva, you have such strength that even in the face of so much pain, you could still have the presence of mind to say the Shema. And what does Rabbi Akiva answer to the question? He says, "My whole life I was waiting for this moment, so I'm not gonna squander it. I'm not gonna fumble it. I'm gonna go out either way. I always dreamt of going out." So he's saying Shema. So this is one of those things, an interpretation where Chassidus gives you sort of a different look. Chassidus is not impressed with this understanding. Rabbi Akiva was a very great sage. His students, that were students of Rabbi Akiva, were also of impeccable quality. That Rabbi Akiva should have the presence of mind to say the Shema at a moment of such horror, that itself is not surprising. It shouldn't be surprising to them. Shouldn't have been surprising. So that wasn't what they were asking Ad Kan. What were they saying Ad Kan? They were asking like this. What is Shema? When we say the Shema, what are we proclaiming? We're proclaiming God's oneness. There's nothing other than God. So good. So it's nice when you sit in shul in the morning in a climate-controlled environment among friends, and you say Shema and you proclaim God's oneness. But in the face of such otherness, of such evil, not only was Rabbi Akiva being tortured and being murdered, but he was being murdered because he was serving God. So in such a moment, you can proclaim God's oneness. In other words, not that he could give his life and sanctify God's name, that's fine, but that he should be able to see the oneness of God even in staring down the face of such otherness, of such another force, of such evil, even in the presence of such evil, to say there's nothing other than God. That's what they were asking. Ad Kan, even in this experience, you can see the unquestionable oneness of God. So what's Rabbi Akiva say? My whole life I've been waiting to do this. What, in other words, he says, there's a concept of Mesiras Nefesh. There's a concept of self-sacrifice. Well, so he said, how does one have self-sacrifice if not with such evil? So what does he see? He doesn't see the evil. He doesn't see the otherness. He sees an opportunity to serve God. The evil is an opportunity to sanctify God's name. So what does he see? He only sees oneness. That's what he was telling him. So that's the second explanation Rabbi Akiva is saying. Rabbi Akiva says that even in the lav, even in the negative command, even in the unholy, what do they see? They see oneness. Even there they see the positive, they see God, nothing else. And therefore, even to the negative command, what did they respond? They responded, hey, yes. They saw the positive in it. In the middle here, the Rebbe quotes about from the Gemara in Chulin about Einoid Movade, that even kshafim, even in sorcery and magic, even there, that expresses God's oneness. So, like we said before, the idea of God's oneness, when there's nothing questioning God's oneness, it's easy to proclaim God's oneness. But what about when there's other powers? You say there's only God, there's only God's force, but what about all these other forces, these evil forces of magic and sorcery and all those things? Isn't that another force? Isn't that another? So the Gemara says no. That even there we see Einoid Movade, meaning that even in something like that, even in that negative, what does it do? It brings out the oneness of God. Similarly, you could say like this: when we look at commandments, we look at sin. Why is there sin in the world? Why is there temptation? Why is there unholiness in the world? So you could say like this: when a person does tshuva, what happens? You realize that a person's bond, tshuva, means, how does a person have the capacity to do tshuva? How is it that tshuva is effective, repentance? Because what we're doing is we're revealing that our bond with God runs deeper than even the ugliness of sin. You're so connected to God that no sin can undo that connection. And that's revealed when a person repents. Okay? So there's that aspect. So there's the negative, and the negative reveals the positive. It reveals the positive in that when a person returns, you see the nature of the indestructible bond that a person has with God that can't even be impacted by sin. But then there's a deeper form of tshuva, and that is where a person's sin says a person does tshuva, whatever the Chazal talk about, person repents to such an extent that his misdeeds become good deeds. So a person commits a crime, and then he does tshuva, he repents, and now his crime counts as a positive act. How is that possible? How is it that something negative could turn into something positive? So based on what we're explaining here, Rabbi Akiva, it makes sense. The idea is, why is there something negative? The point of something negative is for it to fuel your connection with God. So we see how even in the negative, there's that ability. And that's the idea that he brings from the Gemara about magic. That what's the point of having something that seems to challenge the oneness of God? To reveal the oneness of God. So even in that negative, and the more negative it seems, and the more of a challenge it seems to pose to God's oneness, the more that brings out, that expresses God's oneness, the positive, the hein. Okay. Well, let's not learn inside. Let's go back up on top on page 126. And das is masim zu sein shitte reines anishma v'sheimenes ani. This fits with Rabbi Akiva's opinion. The other argument about that the people saw what is heard and they heard what is seen. The be'ez men halt bei der madrege von sheimenes anira. As the niedrige gashmisdike Welt wird bloß aufgenommen mit dem weiten Banem von Schmier. Das heißt, bei ihm ist die Metzies von Welt im Ganzen abgefragt. Und ihr ganze Verrannenkeit wird der Herr schämen, nur machen, was die Reihe ist, was teurer geht auf. Dann ist verstandig, als in jeder Metzies wird gesehen, bloß der Teuchiniger, was hat zu tun mit der Indien von Teurer Mitzvahs. When a person, like Rabbi Akiva says, that they reach that state at Mount Sinai, that they only heard what is seen, when you can be on such a level where the physical world is so abstract to you, it's so not anything, that the only proof that it exists is because Torah tells you that it exists. So now you're seeing the world from sort of that idealized Torah perspective, that it's not anything independent. So it's only because they're able to, that the reality was what was normally seen was only heard, meaning it was distant, it was abstract, it was theoretical, that they were able to then see the positive in all of it. Because the whole thing exists only within a Torah framework, within a Torah perspective. So all of existence, even the ugliness of it, is all godliness. I finished just a story that I think maybe relates to what we just spoke about. I think There's the famous story about there's a woman whose husband had gone missing, had vanished, and she was looking for her husband. She couldn't find him, so she came to the Tzemach Tzedek, I believe it was, asking for direction. Where can she go to find her husband? She couldn't get to him. She had a son who was a mute; he couldn't speak. So somebody suggested, send your son with a note, write down a note, your request, what you're looking for, and have him hide under his table. When he comes out in public, he can hand him the note. So the child did that, and when Tzemach Tzedek came out, he handed him the note, asking. So Tzemach Tzedek said, "Go tell your mother that she can find her husband in in this town." So the child went back, pushed through the crowd, goes back, and tells his mother. It was the first words he ever uttered in his life. So it was a double miracle. A, the Rebbe tells her where her missing husband is, and B, a child who hadn't spoken up to that point for 12 years, for whatever, was suddenly speaking. So they asked him, "What is this, such a miracle? You could have written it. you could have sent the message. It's just such a miracle." So the Rebbe said, "Nobody told me that he couldn't speak. I didn't know he couldn't. I just told him, go tell her." So in a sense, what was he doing? In a sense, he was minimizing the miracle. It was a big miracle that a child who previously couldn't speak is now able to speak, right? But what was the Rebbe saying? What did he say? So in a sense, what was he saying? Right? What we're saying here, this idea that all of existence is all for the. Yeah, is it making sense? Or am I running out of time? What? No. In other words, you can have there's the idea that the world exists, and you have to overcome it to reveal God's oneness. There's ugliness, there's stealing, and by not stealing, you serve God. But then there's something else, which is the stealing itself is not stealing. It's not an obstacle. It itself reveals the oneness. Same idea here. You're saying there's knowing something and overcoming it, and then there's just the way it is straight, right? That everything exists in a manner of serving God.